Hi and welcome to today's Figma tutorial. Today I'll be showing you some of the new features that were added to Figma in this month of June 2023. So I'm going to be dealing with variables and the different arithmetic that were added into Figma. As you can see, I have this prototype right here. As you can see, so these are cool things that I can do with the variables and the different arithmetic. So when I click on this, you can actually see what can happen. I can actually make changes here. As you can see, this is also changing. So this is actually how to quantify things in a cart. So this is one of the cool things that you can do. As you can see, when I click on this minus, it actually also fades away. This and a lot of cool stuff have been introduced in Figma. So without wasting time, let's learn something new and get better at Figma. Alright, let's get into today's video. Hi and welcome to today's Figma video. So basically today I'll be showing you something about the new Figma features that have actually been introduced. So I'll be showing you how to make use of variables and how to use that mathematical arithmetic curriculum inside variables. So that is what we're going to do today. So right now I've already designed here. So it's actually something I've already designed. So this is a shopping page, as you can see. So now what I want to do is I want to animate my shopping cart here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that when a user clicks on this, so this actually shows the quantity of the shopping. So this is the cart quantity counter. So when a user clicks on plus, this value has to keep adding, and then at the same time we also want to be showing some notifications here at the top every single time an item is added to the cart. So that's the purpose of this video. So this frame here is a frame that has two different items. So we have variant 1 and variant 2. So the first variant is the button that shows add to cart, and the second one is the one that shows the cart quantity counter. So right now we're going to start doing some animations for it, but before we do that, let's add the notifications icon. Okay, so now what will happen is let's type in something. So let's type in the text 1. Then let's go back to our design mode. Let's make sure his size is set to 14. 14 is a good side. 4-pin semi-bold. Let me zoom in. Then I'm going to add some auto layout to this. So I'm going to add auto layout. So there we go. Let's add a fill to this auto layout. Let's give it an orange color. I'll give it the orange color with these coordinates FDA 800. Okay, there we go. So now let's center the item. Let's make sure it's at the center, align to center. And then I'm going to go and set this to 26 by 26. Let's make sure that the height is also 26. There we go. Then let's create a border radius that is fully round. Let's give it 100. All right, then let's give our text a white color. So there we go, that looks better. All right, so next we're going to group this. All right, so I've actually grouped it, and then after grouping it, I'm going to create a component. So now let me call this cart notifications. All right, so there we go. Actually, let's add a variant to it. Let's go to properties, add a variant. So we're going to have the default, then click let's first stretch this out, then click Ctrl D, and then we have the variant 2. All right, so that's going to be it for the cart. So we'll come back to that. So now Figma has introduced a new feature that has to do with adding variables, and that is quite new, and it's going to be very useful in this project. I'll show you how that works. So what happens is you can actually assign a variable to any of the items on the Figma board that you can actually see. So let me give you an example. So I can give you an example. So we can change this one. So a variable means a value that keeps changing. So I can make this one here a variable. So, but let's first create the variable. So just click outside the frame anywhere around. Then you have this popping up, local variables. Then select this. Then we have this collection opening up, but we can also choose to create our own collection. Let's create our own. Then let's rename it. Let's call it my variables. There we go. So we can create a new variable. Let's create a variable for numbers. So we want a number to keep changing. Let's make this give it a value of 1 by default, and there we go, we actually have it. Then let's rename it. Let's call it item counter. All right, so there we go. So now we're going to assign that variable to this. So let's go to where we have this. So we're going to look for that one. So where we have the text, so make sure it's set to text, then select the text, then scroll through the text where you have the text, then you actually see this sign here. So this sign allows us to assign or apply variable. So just click apply variable and select item counter. Alright, so there we go. So now that will keep changing in response to that. So let's also go to where we have the cut notifications, and then we're going to select where we have the numbers, or we have the individual numbers. We're going to set that to we're going to apply a variable to that. So let's apply a variable to this one here, set that item counter. Then let's do the same thing in the default, set that item counter to that also. Alright, so there we go, we now have it. Alright, so now this is how we want it to work. So let's first let's place this in. So let's copy our add to cart, let's copy it and place it in our project. Okay, so here we go. Alright, so now the first step in prototyping is one, make sure that when a user clicks on this, they're directed to this other one. So let's add a prototype, let's add an interaction. So on top, want that to change to variant 2, and let that happen as a smart animation. So let's preview that. Now there is a simpler of previewing. We can just click shift spacebar on the keyboard and we can actually already see that. So it's as easy as that now in Figma. So you can actually now preview that. So let's see that. So we now have it appearing. So let's test that out. So when a user clicks on this, you can actually see it changes and goes to the other. Alright, so let's do something else. So now let's do something more. So when a user clicks on this plus icon, and that's the frame I have here. When the user clicks on this, so my plus is within this frame. So when a user clicks on this, we want to make sure an interaction happens. But now we actually have new options. So we go to on tap, but now we're going to set a variable. So now we're going to set the variable to the item counter variable that we'd actually created. And then right now we want to make sure when the user clicks on the plus that the value that we have, the variable, will keep adding by 1. So remember, by default we'd actually set our value as 1 by default. So select this, then we're going to make sure to add the addition function. So I want to make sure that every time a user clicks on it, it will add by 1. So just type 1 on your keyboard and click enter. Alright, and there we go. So let's test that out again. Shift spacebar. So when I click on this, now when I click on this, you can actually see that the value keeps adding, and that's actually working. But now I cannot subtract and go backwards to reduce the item quantity. So let's work on that. So I'll go to where I have this item quantity. When I have this subtract, and I want to also add an interaction. So I'll add the same interaction. I want to set the variable to item counter, and then I want to make sure that its subtraction happens every single time a user clicks on that. So we click enter, and there we go. So let's test that out again. Shift space. So when I click on that, you can actually see that the addition works. Then when I also subtract, it also works. But now we have a problem. The value also goes into negatives, and we actually don't want that. That is actually unnecessary. Okay, so we're going to work on that. So let's go to where we actually have the subtract. So now we're going to set a condition, and that is what we're going to use that to simplify everything. So let's add a condition. So let's click plus to add a condition. So let's add a condition below that. So now the condition we want to make sure is that it will only subtract by 1 as long as the value is greater than 1. Actually, as long as the value is greater than 1, that is when it will subtract by 1. So when it reaches 1, there will be no more subtraction. So we're going to type if item counter is, which we set, is greater than 1. Now we have to set the property that will happen. If it's greater than 1, then we can still set the variable item counter. Actually, you know what? We actually already had the property here. So this property here, so I'd set the property of set item counter -1 at the top. So let's just click on this drop down, and then we're going to drag this, and this will be the action. So we're going to place this where we have the action, and then we release it and place it there. So now that will only happen as long as that is true. So let's click shift space band. Let's see what happens. As you can see, when I click on a plus, it works, but now when we reach 1, it no longer subtracts. So this now is more it ends on 1, and that is more realistic. But now I want to even go better. So when a user clicks on this minus and it's a 1 value here, I want to make sure that it takes them back to the first page. So it will feel like if it goes to 0, it will take them back to the first page. So let's click on this. Then we're going to set another condition. So the else, so if this and this happens, so the else action is going to be change to, let's set that to change to default. So if this is not satisfied, it will change to default. So otherwise it will change to default. So let's test that out again. Then let's see that shift space bar, user clicks on that. So when I click and go minus, you can actually see what happens. Now that's more like it. That's more like a real counter. Alright, so now I've done that and that works perfectly. Now I want to add some other more functionalities. Now I want to make sure that when that changes, that we'll also have notifications happening at the very top. Now this is why we're going to even be making use of what we call Boolean variables. But before we do that, let's first take a copy of this item at the top, the default, and then, sorry about that, let's go back to design mode. Then let's drag that and place it at the top. So this is why I want to see our notifications happening. Right, so now we want to make sure that before a user clicks on this icon, we want to make sure that this was actually not visible. So it only becomes visible after a user clicks on this and there is an item added. So how do we do that? So we're going to go back to the default mode here, and this is where we have it. And then we're going to go to where we have where we actually have the pass through here. So before we do that, let's actually create a Boolean. So what do? We're going to create a Boolean variable. So let's go to, so click anywhere outside, then we're going to add another variable. So let's add a variable. So this time we're going to create a Boolean variable, and we're going to set that to false. So we're going to set that to cut, rename it cut notifications. All right, so there we go. So that's it basically. And then we're going to so we've actually already duplicated this and we have it there. So now we're going to set a property here. We're going to assign it to that Boolean variable. So select the default mode, and then we want the default mode to be set to false. So false means it's not visible, and then true means it will now be made visible. So make sure you have the default selected, and then we're going to scroll down to where we have the pass through right here. Then you're going to right click on your keyboard. Then when you do that, you actually see cut notifications appearing. So select that. It's already set by default to false, so that's why it is not visible, and that is okay. That's exactly what we want. So the other mode will actually be true when it's visible. So as you can see, it's not visible by default. All right, so now let's add some properties. So we want to make sure that before this happens, it was actually not visible, and then that's already true. As you can see, when I click on my shift space, it's not visible right now. When I click on this though, you can actually see it's still not appearing. So I need to do something about that. So what we want to do is when a user clicks on this, we want to make sure that it actually appears. So let's go to prototyping mode, select this. So we already have the change to. Now we're going to add another property. We're going to add another action to the same one. So now we're going to add set variable. So when a user clicks on that, there will be another variable. Now let's first minimize this. We'll now go to cut notifications, and then we're going to select true. So it will be set to true every time a user clicks on that. So let's try that out again. Shift space bar. So let's see what happens when I click on that. Wow, it actually appears perfectly. So let's see what happens when I click on the plus. You can actually see the digits at the top also changing. So they actually change all together, and that is actually working. But now I want to make sure that when a user clicks on this and it takes them back, that this actually will also fade away. All right, so what do we do there? So let's go back to our subtract right here, select that. So we're going to add another property under the condition. So here we're already saying if the item is greater than 1, all right, let's set that on. If the item is greater than 1, then subtraction will keep happening. or else if it's not greater than 1, then it will change to the main page here. So I want to add something else right below this, but before we do that, let's add another action. So the other action is going to be to set the variable. So we're going to set the variable of the catch notifications to false. So it will be set to false now every time we go back to the main page. But now let's close this. Now we're going to add this to the else section. So now you're going to drag this, and then we're going to make sure that it actually happens before the change to. So before it changes to the main page, it will actually have already happened. So make sure and be mindful of this order. All right, so let's try that again. When I click shift space and I click on this, you can actually see that it's actually working well. Then when I go back, you can actually see it actually disappears. So that's actually how we do it. So this was just a basic introduction to variables and how to do that arithmetic in Figma with the new features. I hope this video really helped you. If it did, feel free to give this video a thumbs up and tell me below in the comments if the video really helped you. And again, if you're new to this channel, I encourage you to join the community by subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. See you all in my next video. Bye.